Right. Good morning from my side as well. My name is Adrian Hauptmann. I'm a PhD student at the university in Erlangen-Nürnberg. And the topic I want to present to you today is managing complexity in adaptive case management. And in particular, I want to show you one example of modeling emergence with Lego. I hope this will be will make a whole lot more sense after the presentation. If we just take a quick look at the agenda, I want to give you a quick introduction. What is case management? What does it have to do with BPM? Then I'll show you a quick demo, and then we'll discuss the concept from the demo in theory, and maybe have a quick outlook for the impact for the future. All right, now we are at a BPM conference, right? So we look at the world, or we look at businesses in terms of processes, right? So we try to describe businesses as workflows or processes. So a process can be anything from me going to Amazon, buying a book, right? Once I click purchase, you have this huge process which kicks off with payment, inventory, packaging, logistics, until 2 days later I can have the book in my hand. But a process can also be something a lot simpler, like, for example, me preparing for this presentation, right? The way I want to separate this now is into two sections. One section is processes that are modeled, where we use the traditional BPM tools. And then there's also a large world out there where processes are not modeled for whatever reasons. I'll come to that in a second. So on the left-hand side, it's quite trivial, right? Why do we model processes? All of you know this. We want to achieve automation, we want to increase efficiency, achieve economies of scale, improve output quality, and probably a dozen other things. But if we go on the right-hand side and we look at why modeling doesn't work, first of all, we have the concept of unpredictability. Just by definition, how can I model a process in advance which is unpredictable? It's just not going to work. Second issue is cost-benefit. Think of a process which only has one iteration. The entire idea of modeling processes is that we have multiple iterations and we achieve economies of scale. Now, if I only have a single iteration, the cost will be much higher than the benefit, so I won't model a process. Also term complexity, right? Think if we have a process with a lot of different options, it goes also with hand in hand with cost and benefit. It becomes so complicated that the benefit is just not great enough to go ahead and model the process in a traditional way. And of course, yesterday we had quite an extensive session about exceptions. That's also a practical example for things that we cannot model with the traditional tools. Now, to introduce you to adaptive case management and what it means, we just look at what kind of tools we use in these areas. Now, if we go to the left, we have tools like ARIS, EPCs, Visio, and we might use something like SharePoint to actually implement the process. And on the right-hand side, people use email, Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, all these things. And this is basically the claim for adaptive case management, to be a tool for this right-hand side. Now, to give you a bit of background on case management, the idea of case management has been around for quite a long time. Traditional domains were medical, legal, insurance. And the idea is actually quite simple. We start off with a very basic structured framework, and then we have the execution in each case instance, which can be very different. So for example, I am a doctor at a hospital, right? I have two patients with the same condition. Both have fever. And the first thing they do when they come to the hospital is they'll fill out this questionnaire form, right? What's their age? What's their gender? What previous diseases did they have? What kind of medication are they taking? And then when I go into execution, I may have one person, male, 80 years old, and then I have one person, female, 28 and pregnant, and the execution is obviously going to be very different the way I treat them. And ACM, or adaptive case management, has been a trend which has been around for 3 to 4 years. And the idea is to support unpredictable processes with this concept, with this simple case management idea, and provide ACM systems as a tool for knowledge workers. Now, just as a reference, Mastering the Unpredictable by Svensson, this is really like the first book that introduced this concept into the BPM world. And to summarize it, it's very simple, taking this case management idea and applying it to BPM. All right. Now, I'll just briefly go over a couple of principles. First off, it's goal orientation. Since we don't have a traditional process model which tells us step by step what to do, the goal is really the only thing that remains to keep us on the path to success, so to speak, right? The goal is the only thing we have to know which direction we should be going. So the goal will take up a very significant role in the concept of adaptive case management. And you could say that the goal replaces the traditional model. Second thing is knowledge preservation, right? Same thing a doctor does by gaining experience, he'll become more efficient and make better decisions. If I want to implement an ACM system, I want to try to do the same things, right? I want to use reoccurring elements and patterns, and I want to enable users to continuously improve their knowledge that lies in the system. Last but not least, we have the concept of emergence. And the concept of emergence basically describes the following. If you all know the traditional process lifecycle, right? I have the design phase, I have execution, and then I have controlling, right? Now, we just said we cannot design in advance. So what happens is that designing and execution fall into the same step, right? We do it at the same time. While we're executing, we are designing the process. Now, this sounds quite simple in theory, right? But for me, the biggest challenge is the concept of emergence. Like, how can we actually implement a system which supports this kind of emergence, right? You could think of maybe a system with workflow diagrams like ARIS and make them dynamic. So if I have a process which is in execution already, and maybe I have the ARIS diagram, and then I change something dynamically, and then the background also changes. But it's very difficult to imagine how I can build a comprehensive concept which users actually understand, right? So this, for me, is really the biggest challenge: how to develop a comprehensible concept for emergence, and how can we design an interface that does that. And this obviously is going to be the focus of the demo, which I will show you. All right. Now, before I start the demo, I want to explain to you what I mean by Lego, right? Lego or Lego blocks are basically what I mean is the objects, the entities, the business entities in, for example, a case management system. So if I look at a case management system, I have obviously a case, I have tasks, I have users, I have events, notes, messages, all that stuff. The key point here is that these business entities determine the basic structure of most systems we use today. I'll show you what I mean by that. First off, on a database level, that's very obvious, right? We all know entity relationship models, right? And what we do is we go ahead and say one case can have n tasks, n users can be member of m cases, and so on. But another important thing is also the UI is pretty much always aligned with these business entities, right? So if I look at SharePoint, what building blocks, what Lego blocks do I use in SharePoint? Messages, events, tasks, notes, and files. Now if I look at the main navigation, I also see messages or announcements, calendars, tasks, notes, and documents. Obviously, SharePoint has a little bit of flexibility, but also, second example to make my point, look at Salesforce, right? We have something like messages, contacts, reports, documents. And if we look at the main navigation, we see messages, 4 categories of contacts, reports, and documents. Last but not least, even Google, right? Even something like Google arranges their main navigation according to the business entities they use. All right. Now I will jump to a quick demo. Now I hope this works. We had some trouble with the connection to the beamer, so I'm trying not to touch anything. All right, so just a little bit of background what this is. This is a platform we are currently developing at the chair. It's called COCAMA, Collaborative Case Management. And it's basically a web-based platform for case management. Now, the first thing I want to show you is just a quick overview over the main navigation. So one section we have cases, where we have a list of cases. Also, this is quite an early prototype, so you have to be a little bit imaginary for some parts of this. Next point, we have the point everything. So cases are comprised of tasks and files, and basically the idea behind everything is that I get all the tasks, all the files from all my cases aggregated into one view. And then last but not least, I have recent activity, which is kind of like a timeline where I see recent events that happened in the system, right? Now, the basic idea is, at first glance, this looks exactly like the examples I showed you, right? The main navigation is made of cases. Then I have everything with tasks, messages, and notes. And then I have the recent activity with events. So what we'll do right now is we'll introduce a couple of concepts. So first thing I do, I have this fancy drag and drop usability, and I allow these cases to be nested. So I can just use drag and drop and go ahead and start parent-child relationships. Second thing I do, I have this list, case list 1, and I go ahead and I also allow separate lists. So I can arrange these cases in separate lists, right? So I can easily go here and create a new list, something like this. And then I can go ahead and, I don't know, add a case. And I hope my case will be there. All right. Now, the next thing I want to introduce is the concept of columns. So now we go ahead and we have the choice between a 50-50 layout, 70-30, or maybe 3 columns, right? So maybe I go and do this, and now I can take these lists and move them from one side to the other, right? And obviously, the idea is that I also can take cases and move them from one side to the other. Now, this looks cool. Maybe it's a fancy drag and drop dashboard, but so far it's nothing spectacular. So now I jump into a case. We said cases are comprised of tasks, messages, and notes. So I have a list for tasks, I have a list for messages, and I have a list for notes. And now you can see what's coming. I do the exact same thing, right? I add a new column. I can move these things around. And now I can even start mixing stuff, right? I can build parent-child relationships with messages and tasks. Same thing with notes over here. And so I can start arranging my environment the way I see fit. Now, the last thing I want to show you is the concept of the clipboard. Clipboard is exactly what it sounds like. I can just take certain things from my case, put them in the clipboard, and then maybe jump to a different case. Hope I have a list where you get the idea. And put them in a separate case. So I can use the clipboard to move information from one case to another. OK, so far for the demo. All right. So let's recap. We started off similar to the examples I showed you with Salesforce and SharePoint. Then we went on and we had a flat list of cases, and we introduced the concept of nesting. So we can just go ahead and nest cases in any way we want to. And then we introduced some structural elements, like separate lists, columns, sections for the vertical. Then we jump inside of a case, and we had separate lists for tasks and files. And now, this is what I mean by Lego, right? We go into Lego mode. We allow users to basically define their environment as they see fit. Now, what does this do, actually? First of all, we are in some way backwards compatible, right? I can just think of this as a simple discussion forum, and I can only use the message building block to build a nested, straightforward discussion forum. I can use this to build a simple to-do list, right? Now the next thing is hybrid versions. I can start, on the left-hand side, I may have something like Google Docs with rich text editing, right? And on the right-hand side, I start opening up my to-do list because I see I have some issues in the text which I need to take care of. And now the third one, now the screenshot is not very good, but the third one is obviously the idea or the intention that you can start getting creative with this. So you could think of something like a doodle, right? I'll have one section which poses the question, where do you want to go for Christmas dinner? And then I'll have answer one, which is Chinese, second one is Italian, and people can sign up their name in the respective lists. Or I could also think of something like a Kanban system, right, where we have separate lists of issues and we move them from one section to another. Obviously, my intention or the entire idea is for people to get creative with this. And now we come to the clipboard, and that's also, in the context of knowledge preservation, a very important part. Now I can use this to move information from one case to another, but think of it as something like this, the Star Trek replicator thing, right? What happens if I can use these structures, these Lego structures, to preserve knowledge? So I take a Lego structure and I put it in a template storage facility or something, and I can retrieve and duplicate these structures any way I see fit, right? And then this idea all of a sudden becomes much more powerful. All right, so much for the demo. Let's see. So let's go into the theoretical background. Now this is where we started, right? We separated the process world into processes that are modeled and processes that are not modeled. Now on this side, I can, it's very straightforward what I can do. I have a process model. I can go ahead and derive the business entities and their relationships. Then I can go ahead, okay, I have their relationships. Now I can derive the database structure, the architecture, what kind of systems do I need? And then I can start implementing the user interface and the possibilities for user interaction. Now if I go on the other side, I don't have a process model, so the entire process breaks down, right? If I don't have the process, if I don't have the business entities, how can I start modeling a database model or design a UI if I don't know what to design? So in fact, you will need some kind of concept that can account for all possibilities. So basically, the basic idea behind Lego is we have an arbitrary data tree, which means I can simply go ahead and nest anything with anything, So I have no fixed relations in the system, and I separate data from structure. And basically, the user can decide what kind of structure they want to use. Now, if I just present the user with a gigantic data tree, this is going to create difficulties in usability. So what I did is introduce some structural elements like these lists you saw, like the columns you saw, and the sections. And also, I imposed certain limitations on the nesting just to make it more comprehensible to the user. Now, if we look at the IT landscape of the systems, it's never a black and white world, right? Depending on the factor we look at, it's always a continuum in one way. So if we look at flexibility, and we have the examples of SAP on the left, SAP, Salesforce, SharePoint, and over here we have the Word, PowerPoint, and OneNote, these more flexible applications. We can separate between system-defined structure and user-defined structure. And obviously, flexibility increases if the further we go to the right. We can also look at other things, right? Predictability, repeatability, or the number of use cases we can use. The key I actually want to make is at some point across this line, we'll have a separation between data and structure, right? If I look at, let's take Microsoft Word, right? What kind of Lego blocks are in Microsoft Word? It's something like text, it's bullet point lists, numbered lists, it's tables, it's images. The way I arrange them is totally up to me, right? So Microsoft Word, in a very similar way, also separates data from structure and leaves the structure up to the user. All right, now, just to summarize or give you a quick outlook, about the impact of this concept. Now I can use this for the case management idea, right? I can stick to the context of case management and say this is a concept for modeling emergence and case management. But also I think, or at least in my perspective, there's more potential. This is actually the first version I built, so you see the same elements, but it looks not as nice. You can just move this into SharePoint as an app, and then you can start connecting both worlds, right? You have really the straightforward traditional modeled world, which is implemented with the SharePoint instance, and maybe you can hook up the system into a SharePoint to kind of bridge the gap between both worlds. And last but not least, this is just a very rough idea, but think about knowledge or file browsing. Just imagine if your Windows Explorer could do something more than just moving files. What happens if it could, handle tasks, handle emails, handle all the information we spread out in apps all over the cloud, and if we can just, model these in something like a Windows Explorer. All right. Any questions, comments, suggestions?
Thank you. Where does the semantics of the domain meet your structures? If you keep your two strands, at some point they have to come together. Yes. How do you manage that?
Well, I think the SharePoint example might be a good idea. At some point, if you have like a process diagram, you will always have these. As soon as you go into unpredictable processes, you will always have these clouds of, fuzzy unknown processes, and I think this is where we meet. So if I just draw a simple diagram, and at some point, I have the straightforward EPC, and then at some point I have this, just cloud where I can use case management to actually solve this, and then this will go back into the standardized process.
So you have a common set of basic entities, and they propagate from the left to the right.
But this depends. I don't think it's really easy to implement, communication between the structured and the unstructured world. But same example here. If you use this in a SharePoint environment, and these tasks are actually tasks that are saved or stored in the SharePoint environment, then I can actually use this to connect the both worlds. But how exactly I would do it?
If you remember the talk yesterday evening,
yeah,
the solution we had there was a layered concept somehow. If you remember the subject.
The email, arbitrary email cycle.
Could you think about something like that in abstracting cases actually, or having some abstract entity?
Sure. I mean that's we can. If we have like a process like this, right, and we go, I don't know, here, and then we have this fuzzy cloud where I don't know what to model, and at some point I'll go here, and this is represented by the case, and then at some point I'll go back.
So it's the same idea.
It's the same idea, yeah. But I think, with the example we saw yesterday, I mean, this was just an arbitrary model using email as managing anything that's possible, and you lose this entire idea of preserving knowledge, right? Because if I just record my interaction in form of email, I will never be able to retrieve the information I put in. Now I think with something like this, right, where you have actually structures which you can reuse and put together as you see fit, this becomes much more powerful because I can preserve the knowledge that I have, and I can continue to improve it. Yes?
So first of all, I have to say that I'm excited about your presentation and the demo.
Thank you.
And we should have to follow up. So I have several questions. First, could you tell something about the availability of the software? So how it is distributed, is open source, is closed source, and so on. And secondly, can you tell something about the technology? Is this a Java Enterprise application, or do you have service APIs or REST APIs?
Okay, for the first question, I have to speak to my boss, I think. I'm not sure. This is, as I said, it's a system we develop at the chair, and I cannot, so far we haven't decided on whether to make it open source or what kind of business models we need. As far as the technology is concerned, the entire application is implemented in Java. So it's Java EE on the server side. And we use, I don't know if you guys are programmers, the Google Web Toolkit, which uses Java to also generate the front end. And we intend to use this, obviously, in a cloud environment, right? It's a browser-based application, so it has all the capabilities to go as a cloud-based system.
Do you have any kind of interfaces to the system? I think you can connect to data sources, but maybe also some logic, business logic or something.
We have, actually, my colleague who was also working on it, he did one study on this, connecting a case management system like this with a traditional BPM system. So we are working on these things. But I think you have to probably talk to him about more details. I cannot give you anything more detailed, I'm sorry.
Comments, questions? Yes.
Did you actually consider taking into account of how the user arranges his Lego blocks? I mean, it's not just the hierarchical nesting, but it might also be really the two-dimensional arrangement on the web page, for example. Did you consider that, or do you focus on the nesting structure?
Do you mean as in terms of columns when you go into?
For example, yeah. Because if the user basically arranges the tasks and the document, as in the Google documents like example,
yeah.
Then you could, if they are besides each other, definitely draw some kind of conclusion that these tasks are really related, as opposed to if they were below each other.
Okay.
They would not be as strongly connected, I think.
Whew, yeah, I think that's a good idea, but you know, with something like this, what I can show you is I have the concept of sections, which I actually. No, I don't want to touch anything. Oh, this is from the hotel. There we go. You saw this, right? This was a case, and I can start columns. I also have separate sections, right? I can open up a new section, and the top one might have 2 columns, and the bottom one might have 3 columns or something. And this might be something where you can also divide the area or the space into separate blocks, which have which are more closely related. The things are in here are more closely related than the things in here or something.
One after the other, please. Okay, please.
Okay, thanks. Maybe a silly question. How do you know that the case is finished, especially when many people are working in this case? And we are going back to this example when you're approaching the cloud.
Yeah.
You have to go back to a standardized process. Do you have something like states or initial state, ending state?
The thing is, when you start implementing states, you know, you have to know which states are possible, right? So as far as this is a prototype, so there's nothing implemented in this version as far as states is concerned. What you could think about something, maybe I can define certain states, and then I can just simply go on the top right or something, and I can go and select which state I'm in. That would certainly be a valuable concept. And also I will have some way of finishing the case, because if I cannot finish a case, then you know, my list here will get quite large, and obviously that's a thing we have to take care of.
Yeah, because the idea is if you're trying to pull out a template for a specific task, then after that you know, according to the template, what states you were going through.
Ah, okay.
Because you learned that.
Yeah.
And that could be some kind of enrichment of these ideas.
It's you know, the thing with the template and the clipboard, this could be also something which I can apply on a case level, right? I don't know if this works now. No, it doesn't. But I also have the clipboard right here, right? And I can take entire case structures and use these as templates. That's also totally valuable. So, as I said, this is just a prototype, but thank you for the input. Yeah, it's a great idea. I think he was first, sorry.
So perhaps a related question. So as far as I can see, you associate different things through, let's say, aggregation, like nesting, things like that. So have you considered associating things using simple types of associations? I mean, this task is somehow associated with this thing, because I'm doing it just after it. Or this document is somehow an output or an input. It doesn't have to be that somehow associated with this task.
I think I know what you mean. For me, I'm rather careful about implementing things like these logic. Let's see, where was it? There we go. If I start, implementing logic and relationships, sequential things like governance. In fact, it's governance in some respect, right? I think it's going to be very difficult to make it comprehensible to a user, right? Because a user must understand what happens when I put the task.
Don't touch it.
Oops. There you go. When I move a task from this place to another, and if I start, maybe, let's say I have this example, right? And what I could implement is, I could say, I can only finish off this one when I finished off all the child tasks, right? This would be like a standard child-parent governance thing. But if I make it more complex, I think it will become very difficult for users to comprehend what is actually going on. So yeah. So I'm very defensive on this issue. For me, I want to keep it simple at first, and then we can start talking about more complicated things. But at first, I really want to be. I will be happy if users actually understand this and can work with this. Then I'm totally happy at first, right? Because I think this is already quite a challenge to make users comprehend that they can now move everything around, and we'll see what happens.
First question, can you define multi-relationships? And second question is, can you assign your content objects to people, like in Jira? So this is maybe also an answer how you can close a task. So in the end, it is only the Scrum Master can close a story or a task or something like that.
First question, multi-relationships, no. This is based on a standard data tree, right? And a data tree only has one dimension or two dimensions, so I cannot go ahead and one child can only have, or an item can only have one parent element, not two, so it's just not implemented, so it's not possible. Obviously with tasks or any kind of objects, I can show you maybe, this is also, if I want to add something, right? The idea is I can add a task, I can add a message, or I can add a note. And obviously I can, make this form a lot longer and have, a task is assigned to someone, task has a due date and a progress and all the other stuff. So this is something I will implement it within the next weeks. So that's, of course, we'll do that. And also, you asked about the manager only being allowed to do certain things. That's the same, actually the same question as before, where I would say, give me another 6 months or something, and then maybe we can talk about it, because I don't think it makes much sense to start with something so complicated.